My brother was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they owed him something. I don't know how he did it. He had this way of tilting his head and saying your name like it was a favor, like just the fact that he remembered you existed was something you should be grateful for. Growing up, I thought that was charm. It took me until I was 22 years old and staring at an empty bank account to realize it wasn't charm at all. It was just manipulation. I hadn't learned to name yet. I was the quiet one. That's what everyone called me. Not in a mean way, just as a fact, the way you'd say the sky is gray in November. My brother was loud and funny and magnetic, and I was the one sitting at the kitchen table with a textbook open, highlighter in hand, trying not to take up too much space. My mom used to say I came out of the womb already worrying about something. She meant it fondly, I think. We grew up in Dayton, Ohio. My dad worked at a logistics company for 23 years before his back gave out, and my mom picked up shifts at a grocery store deli counter when she could. We weren't poor in the way that makes it into movies, no evictions, no empty fridges. But we were the kind of poor where every decision had a dollar amount attached to it, where you checked the sales circular before you made dinner, where new sneakers meant something had to wait. My brother. I'll call him my brother because that's all he is to me now. A relationship without a name attached. Was 4 years older than me. He was the kind of kid teachers wanted to believe in. He tested well. He interviewed well. He had the kind of face that made adults assume the best. He went to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, stayed 3 semesters, and came home with a business idea and no degree. My parents didn't even raise their voices. They sat at the kitchen table, nodded, and said they believed in him. I watched that happen from the doorway of the kitchen. I was 16. I remember thinking, that's interesting. That's a very interesting thing I just saw. I made a decision that night. Not out loud, not in any dramatic way. I just quietly decided that whatever I was going to do with my life, I was going to do it so completely, so thoroughly, that no one would ever be able to pull me back. I found out about the pre-law program at Georgetown the way I found out about a lot of things, by accident, in the school library, reading a magazine someone had left on a chair. There was a profile of a woman who'd grown up in Toledo, gone to Georgetown on financial aid, and was now a federal prosecutor. I don't know why that article hit me the way it did. I read it 3 times. I tore it out and kept it in my desk drawer for 2 years. Junior year, I started working at a sandwich shop after school. Saturdays at a dry cleaner. I opened a savings account with my own name on it, and I did not tell anyone it existed. Not because I was secretive by nature. I wasn't, but because I'd watched what happened to money in our house. It moved toward my brother like water running downhill. It just happened. No one decided it. It was just gravity. I applied to 8 schools. I got into 4. Georgetown offered me a partial scholarship, work study, and a loan package that made it possible. Not comfortable, possible. The night I got the acceptance letter, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried quietly into a pillow so no one would hear. My parents were proud. My mom told the women at church. My dad shook my hand, which was more than he usually did, and I understood it for what it was. My brother texted me a thumbs up emoji. That was it. A thumbs up emoji. I remember looking at my phone for a long moment and then setting it face down on the table. The first year of school was hard in a way I hadn't anticipated, not academically. I could handle the reading, the case briefs, the late nights. It was the loneliness that got me. The way everyone else seemed to have a shorthand I hadn't been issued. They'd done Model UN and debate camp and had parents who were lawyers or professors, and they talked about things with a casual fluency that made me feel like I'd arrived speaking a different language. I kept my head down. I made 2 friends I trusted. I studied until my eyes burned. I called home every Sunday. My mom would tell me about the neighbors, about what was on sale at the store, about her knees bothering her. My dad would come on for a few minutes, say not much, hand the phone back. My brother was sometimes there and sometimes not. When he was, he'd ask how school was going, and then start talking about himself before I finished answering. Second year, I got a part-time job at a small civil rights law firm in D.C., filing documents and sitting in on client meetings when they let me. I started to feel like I was actually in the right place. I started to feel, for the first time in my life, like I was building something that belonged to me. That was when my brother called. It was a Tuesday in February. Cold. I was walking back to my apartment from the library with my coat pulled up around my ears. He said he needed to talk. His voice was different, quieter than usual, which should have been my first warning because my brother at normal volume was already at 10% capacity. When he was quiet, it meant he wanted something big. He'd started a business. An e-commerce company selling home goods, candles, decorative items, that kind of thing. He'd been running it for about 8 months. It had gone okay for a while, he said, but he'd over-ordered inventory and then a supplier fell through and now he was sitting on $20,000 of product he couldn't move, and he owed more than that to the people who'd helped him get started. He said the word investors, but I was pretty sure from context he meant people he knew personally who had lent him money and were now asking for it back. He needed $40,000 to pay off what he owed and stabilize things. He had a plan, he said. He'd already figured out a new distributor. He just needed a bridge loan, basically, from family. He'd pay it back in 18 months. I told him I didn't have $40,000. He said he knew that, but he said that mom and dad had savings. He used the phrase, set aside, and he thought if I talked to them, if I helped explain the business side of it in a way they could understand, they'd be more likely to come on board. He needed me to be the bridge between him and them. He said I was the smart one. He said that like it was a compliment. I said I didn't think that was a good idea. He said he really needed this. He said family helped family. He said it was just a loan. He said a lot of things. I let him say them, and then I said I had to go, and I would think about it. I thought about it for approximately 48 hours. I thought about the dry cleaner on Saturdays. I thought about the article in the library. I thought about the savings account with my name on it. And then, I called my mom. I did not call to facilitate the loan. I called to check in, the way I always did. And partway through the conversation I mentioned that my brother had reached out. She went quiet for a second. Then she said yes. She and my dad had already talked to him. She said they were thinking about it. She said they wanted to help him get back on his feet. I asked how much. She paused. Then she said most of what they had saved. She said it like she was apologizing. She said they'd still have the emergency fund. She used the phrase, "we'll keep a little aside." And she said my brother had really thought this through this time. She said she believed in him. I stayed on the phone a few more minutes and then said goodnight and sat very still in my apartment for a long time. The next 6 weeks were strange. I didn't say anything to anyone. I focused on school. I filed more documents at the firm. I read case briefs at midnight, but something had shifted in me, in the way a foundation shifts, not dramatically, not all at once, just enough that you notice the doors don't close the way they used to. 3 months later, I got a call from my mom in the middle of a Thursday. She sounded strained. She said there had been a complication with my brother's business. The distributor hadn't worked out. The inventory was still mostly unsold. He'd had to refund 2 of the people he owed money to, and those refunds had come from the savings she and my dad had given him. What was left wasn't going to cover the outstanding debt. She said they were trying to figure out what to do. I asked about the emergency fund they'd kept aside. She was quiet for a moment. She said some of that had gone too. I closed my eyes. I asked if they needed help. She said maybe just for now, just while things stabilized. She said she hated to ask. She said she knew I was in school. She said she knew money was tight. But she said if I had anything I could spare. I said I would see what I could do. I didn't say yes. I said I would see what I could do, and I meant it exactly as I said it. That night I sat at my kitchen table and opened a spreadsheet. I did this the way I did everything. Quietly. Thoroughly. I wrote down my expenses. My loan disbursements. My income from the firm and the work study. I wrote down what I would need to finish the degree without falling behind. I wrote down my savings. Then I thought about my brother's thumbs up emoji. I called my mom back the next morning and I said I could send $200 a month while I was in school. That was the number I could spare without compromising anything critical. I said I loved them and I wanted to help. But I also needed to be honest about what I could do. She thanked me. She sounded tired. I never spoke to my brother about it. He never called to thank me or to apologize. If he thought about what his choices had done to our parents' savings that had taken them a decade to build, he never mentioned it. He started a new business the following spring. I know this because my mom mentioned it in passing on a Sunday call, her voice careful and neutral in the way people's voices get when they're carrying something they don't want to drop. I graduated from Georgetown Law on a Saturday in May. My parents came. My mom wore a dress she'd bought new, which she almost never did. And my dad took 17 photos of me in my regalia, which I know because I counted them later. My brother didn't come, he sent a text. Congratulations, it said. Big day. I stared at that text for a while, then I put my phone in my pocket and took a photo with my mom with the campus fountain behind us. I passed the bar on my second attempt. First attempt, I was short on sleep and overprepared in the wrong areas. Second attempt, I was just ready. I got a job at a mid-sized litigation firm in Chicago. Not the flashiest place, not the biggest name, but solid with a reputation for taking on complex civil cases. I was 26 years old. I had a salary that felt unreal the first time I saw it. I had a studio apartment near the lake and a second-hand couch and a coffee maker I'd bought myself. I started to feel like the person I had been trying to become. For a while, my family and I fell into a kind of careful distance. Not estrangement. We still talked, still sent birthday texts, still had Christmas video calls where everyone smiled in the same slightly strained way. But the intimacy had worn thin, like a sweater washed too many times. My brother had moved to Phoenix by then. Something about a fresh start. He and I spoke maybe twice a year. I dated someone for 2 years. We ended things mutually and kindly, which is the best you can hope for. I made friends at the firm, real ones, the kind who knew my history. I started running, which I'd never done before, just because I needed something to do with the part of my brain that didn't turn off. Life, in other words, was happening. Quietly and imperfectly, and mine. I was 29 when my brother called and things changed again. It was a Friday evening in October. I'd just gotten home from a brutal week. We were in the middle of a trial preparation that had everyone in the office running on 4 hours of sleep and cold brew. I was standing in my kitchen eating cereal because I didn't have the energy to cook, still in my work clothes, when my phone rang. I almost didn't pick up. He said he was in trouble. Not business trouble this time, real trouble. He was being sued. An investor, a woman he'd brought into his second company, was claiming he'd misrepresented the business's financial position when she invested. She had documentation. She had a lawyer. The suit was for $85,000 plus legal fees. He said he needed help. He said he needed me. And then he said something I hadn't expected. He said he was sorry. He said he knew he'd made things hard for our family. He said he knew Mom and Dad's savings had never fully recovered. He said he'd been carrying that for a long time, and he knew an apology didn't fix it. I stood in my kitchen with a spoon in my hand and didn't say anything for a moment. Then I asked him one question. I said if I hadn't gone to law school, if I'd come home when things got hard the way you wanted me to, the way everyone expected me to, where would either of us be right now? He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. I wasn't asking to be cruel. I genuinely wanted him to sit with it, because the answer was simple. If I had done what everyone expected me to do, I would have nothing to offer him now. I would have no skills, no license, no credibility. The thing he needed from me today existed only because I had refused, years ago, to give up the thing I was building. I told him I would look at the complaint he'd been served. I told him I was not his attorney and could not represent him. My firm had conflict protocols, and I wasn't in a position to take this on personally. But I could review the documents and tell him honestly what he was looking at and what kind of help he needed to find. I told him I'd do that because he was my brother, and because my parents would be devastated if this went badly and they found out I hadn't tried. But I also told him that was the extent of what I could do, and that if he wanted to call and talk through what I found, he needed to actually listen this time. Not tell me he had it handled. Not half listen while thinking about something else. Actually listen. He said okay. I sat down on my second-hand couch and finished my cereal. I reviewed the complaint that weekend. It wasn't good. The investor had solid documentation, emails, a financial projection my brother had sent her that didn't match the actual books. She had a legitimate case. I put together a summary of what he was facing and what his realistic options were, including the name of a business litigation attorney in Phoenix I knew from a conference, someone good who charged reasonable rates. I called him Sunday afternoon and I walked him through all of it. He listened. He asked questions. Real ones, not deflections. For the first time and maybe ever, I felt like I was talking to him rather than around him. He said thank you. He said it twice. I said, "You're welcome." And then I said, "I hope you figure this out. I really do. But I need you to understand something. What I was able to do for you today, this phone call, this analysis, this referral, it exists because of a decision I made when I was 17 years old to not let anyone pull me off my path, including you. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying it because I think you deserve to hear it clearly." He said he understood. I don't know if he did. I don't know if that conversation changed anything for him in a lasting way. People don't usually transform in a single phone call. They transform slowly, in private, over time, or they don't. But I know what changed for me. After I hung up, I sat for a while in the quiet of my apartment, watching the light move across the floor. And I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not vindication in the way you imagine it when you're young and angry. Just a kind of steadiness, a sense of standing on ground that was actually mine. My parents came to visit me in Chicago that Christmas. My mom walked around my apartment touching things, the bookshelves, the window frames, the coffee maker, with this expression on her face that I didn't have a word for until later. It was pride, I think. The complicated kind, that has some grief in it too. She said, "You built all of this yourself." She wasn't talking about the furniture. I said, "I had help." I said, "I had you." Which was true. Not the kind of help I wished I'd had, maybe. Not the kind where they had more to give, but the kind where she worked a deli counter so there was food on the table, and he took 17 photographs at my graduation. And they came to Chicago at Christmas and walked around touching my bookshelves. That's a kind of help. I've learned not to throw it away just because it wasn't everything. My brother settled the lawsuit. The attorney I referred him to helped him negotiate the claim down significantly. He called to tell me, and he sounded lighter than he had in years. He said he was taking some time before starting anything new. He said maybe he'd get a regular job for a while, figure out how he actually worked before he tried to build something again. I said that sounded like a good idea. We hung up. I went for a run along the lake path, the kind of gray November morning that Dayton used to have. The cold that smells like something about to change. I ran until my lungs ached, and then I slowed down and walked the last half-mile back with my hands in my pockets, watching the water. I thought about a girl in a school library, reading a magazine article about a woman from Toledo. I thought about a savings account no one knew about. I thought about a thumbs-up emoji on a Saturday in May. And I thought, it's mine, all of it, the hard parts, the lonely parts, the parts that cost me something. It's mine, and no one can have it. That's the only thought I've ever had that felt completely, permanently true. I've thought about this a lot over the years, what it actually means when a decision pays off. Not in the way people talk about it in graduation speeches, where everything sounds clean and earned and obvious in retrospect. In real life, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like a Tuesday night eating cereal in your work clothes, too tired to cook, wondering if you're doing the right thing. It feels like sending $200 a month to your parents while you're still paying down student loans and telling yourself it's enough, even when it doesn't feel like enough. It feels small and unglamorous and nothing like the article I read in that school library when I was 16. But here's what I've come to understand. The choices that shape your life rarely feel significant when you make them. They feel like small, quiet acts of stubbornness. Keeping a savings account no one knows about. Saying, "I'll see what I can do," instead of yes. staying on the phone and walking someone through a legal complaint on the Sunday afternoon because it's the right thing to do, even when they haven't earned the right to ask. What I did wasn't remarkable. It wasn't brave in any dramatic sense. I just kept making the next correct decision, one at a time, for years, even when I was tired and lonely and unsure. That's not a talent. That's a practice. And it's available to anyone willing to do it without applause. My brother is smart. He always was, but there's a particular kind of intelligence that never gets tested, that floats on charm and on other people's belief in it, and that intelligence tends to stay soft. Mine got tested constantly, by necessity, by circumstances, by every professor who didn't care about my background, and every loan statement that showed up in my inbox. Getting tested like that either breaks you or it builds something in you that doesn't break easily. I got lucky that it built rather than broke. But luck only explains part of it. The rest was just showing up, again and again, to the hard thing. I think about the $200 a month I sent home. I used to feel guilty that it wasn't more. Now I understand it differently. That number was the result of an honest accounting, of what I could actually give without compromising what I was building. Honesty about your own limits isn't coldness, it's integrity. And integrity, practiced consistently over time, is the only foundation that actually holds. The question I asked my brother that Sunday, if I had come home back then, where would either of us be, wasn't rhetorical. I wanted him to think about it, because the thing that saved him in that moment, the thing that connected him to a good attorney and kept the lawsuit from destroying him, existed only because I had refused, years earlier, to abandon what I was trying to become. Our choices ripple outward in ways we can't always see. The decision I made at 17 didn't just shape my life. It shaped what I was able to do for him at 29. That's the part no one tells you about choosing yourself. It's not selfish. It might be the most generous thing you ever do.